Looking in your eyes, I see a paradise. This world that I found is too good to be true. Standing here beside you, want so much to give you this love in my heart that I'm feeling for you.
Let 'em say we're crazy, I don't care about that. Put your hand in my hand, baby, don't ever look back. Let the world around us just fall apart. Baby, we can make it if we're heart to heart. And we can build this dream together, standing strong forever. Nothing's gonna stop us now. And if this world runs out of lovers, we'll still have each other. Nothing's gonna stop us. Nothing's gonna stop us now.
Hey gals and guys, this is Michael of Cinema de Meep. Thanks for joining me today. I'm recording this with love in my heart. And this is, directly from the heart, I would say. I wanted to focus on something a little different. I'm going to do like a sort of a top 10 list, but I wanted to bring you the year that I love from film, 1987. And the reason why I landed on 1987, because that was a big year for me with movies. I was 12, and when 1987 came by, I just kind of... There was just so much going on with movies. There were so many things playing in theaters, and that kind of appealed to me. And the video store, the home video market was just boomed, and it was kind of a tornado in my life. It was something that I just got so caught up in. I was either always at the movie theater or at the video store in 1987. So my adolescence was movies very much. So I kind of blame 1987 for the person I am now, whether it be good or bad. I like to say good, because movies have brought a lot to my life, and they mean a lot to me. And I'm sure they mean a lot to you if you're listening to this podcast, because this podcast is obviously about the love for movies and the pure love for movies. So I'm glad you can join me today and talk about this year. And I hope you like 1987. So I just wanted to... That song that we played at the top of the podcast was a very 1987 song. It was Starships, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now. It's from a movie that may be discussed today. It was an Oscar-nominated song, so I'm only going to discuss Oscar-nominated films and high art films. Just kidding. When we get to that film, you'll know that's clearly not the case. But it's a fun movie, and that's a big word for 1987. Fun, transitional. 1987, things were changing a bit. I would say 1987 though was probably the most 1980s of all the years in that decade. Things just seemed very of that decade, very much like pastels and neons were coming onto the scene, and this vibrancy, and movies were shot. A lot of movies were shot in Southern California or West Coast, and there was just it's kind of a look and a feel that was captured in movies and even in music too. Just something about it that I know some critics or high-minded people might say is maybe not for the best for our culture, but I think there's a lot to be had, and a lot of fun to be had. So that's important to me. And it's what shaped my adolescence and teenage years later on. So thank you, 1987. And so let's get into it. Let's talk about the movies that shaped our lives. I'm going to do this in a little bit of a different way. I'm going to talk about movies that I loved in 1987 rather than like my top 10 movies from 1987 now, because it's a different list. What I liked back then might not reflect exactly what I love now. But and there are definitely some crossover titles. I would say movies that I still absolutely love, but I would say that's a little bit different. 1987 was a good year for film generally. I mean, there were some great movies that came out, legitimately great movies that won awards and blah blah blah. Although I don't particularly agree with the Best Picture winner that year for The Last Emperor. I found a little bit dull, but that's just me. There's Broadcast News, which is a great movie, and Moonstruck, movie I love now. So much so that I'm actually living in the neighborhood that the bakery in that movie is set in. It was around the corner from where I'm living now, and they moved it a couple blocks away. So it's kind of cool, like walking by there and picturing Nicolas Cage and and talking to Cher about his hand and that whole scene. That's great. So RoboCop came out in 1987, a great movie. I saw it in the theater and I liked it a lot, but I didn't quite appreciate it until a little bit later on, maybe on video, and saw that it was a bit more than just the silly action movie. It was a lot more than that. Fatal Attraction, of course, was a great movie that came out that year. Very popular, water cooler kind of film, but and I love it to this. I really love it, but I probably didn't appreciate it as much as I did then. Full Metal Jacket, of course. So many films. So I'm going to leave off a lot of titles that you'd be like, why are you talking about this one, not this one? But this is my list. This is my 1987 list, my 12-year-old self, 1987 list, if you will. So let's talk about it. And I'm going to play the trailer for our first film. Here it is.
Most college kids dream of making a fortune after they graduate. Todd can't wait that long.
Custom-made shoes by satellite. You've got the entrepreneurial spirit to burn. It's in my blood. Big plans, dreams for the future.
That is a lot of money to be carrying around, CJ.
30 days, 30%. 30%?
$10,000, 30 days. $10,000. If anybody can pull themselves out of this, I know you can.
A lot of money for a kid like you.
Well, CJ, you'd be right if I were an ordinary kid, but I can pull this off. I'm talking about a men's calendar for women. There's going to be 12 handsome guys on the cover, one for each month. And it was more clean-cut than Brett Wilson boy died. I am on the verge of the hottest promotional landslide this country's ever seen, and this calendar is just the beginning. Do you love this? Is this great? Got it all figured out. What could possibly go wrong?
I got a job waiting for my graduation. $50 a year, I'll buy a lot of beer. Things are going.
I said to him, if you turn it into a circus, I'm gonna break your face.
Right here, Muffy.
I'm too alright. Getting good grades, the future's so bright. I gotta wear shades. I'm heavenly blessed and worldly wise. I'm a big one.
Just love the business one.
Things are going
Ladies
great.
and gentlemen, and calendar man himself, ASU's Todd Barry.
Getting good grades.
Campus Man.
The future's so bright. I gotta wear shades. I gotta wear shades.
So that was Campus Man, which starred John Dye as this entrepreneur, aspiring businessman who's basically getting kicked out of college because he owes tuition money, and he's desperate for money, and he cooks up some big scheme to get some dough to pay for his college, and he invests in a calendar for men based on like his friendship with this swimmer named Brett Wilson, and who's like a good friend of his, and all his other jock friends, and he takes a loan out with this kind of sketchy guy played by Miles O'Keefe, and I think the character's name was Cactus Jack. Really silly. And so, and then he hooks up with Morgan Fairchild, she discovers the photo of Brett Wilson and his calendar, and she wants to make him like the look of the man of the 80s look, and so she tries to get him, and meanwhile his friend doesn't want any part of this. He's just doing him a favor by trying to keep him in school by doing the calendar itself, and then it just becomes like a bigger thing where he has to like model, and it affects like his diving. He's on the diving team, and he's like the star of the diving team, and that's affecting that for the worse, and so their relationship is compromised. So it's like a totally 80s college movie, and really silly and kind of trite. And it wasn't no big shakes at the box office. It made just under $1 million. I don't think it was opened very wide, maybe like 300 screens or something. But I did catch it in the theater in 1987. I've mentioned this on previous podcasts. I believe that 1987 was a year I tried to see as much as possible in the theater. So I saw all these big movies and little movies alike, and I would count this as one of the little movies, even though it was released by Paramount. They just didn't care about like some of their smaller titles they acquired from Atlantic or other divisions, and I don't know why I like this movie so much growing up. I think I know why, because it's like a silly movie. It's about college, and when you're 12 years old, you kind of dream about what your college experience, what kind of life you're gonna have. Will you be like the John Dye character and want to like scheme your way into things, or try to be successful at that age, or be like the jockey guy, or the wacky best friends. Like Kathleen Wilhoit is one of the characters in this movie, and I absolutely love her, and she's kind of like an antagonist for the John Dye character. Let me just say that John Dye, the lead in this movie, actually passed away at a fairly young age, which is kind of sad. I think he was on a popular show. I want to say Touched by an Angel or one of those things, but he died, and that's kind of sad. And I liked him in this movie. He's kind of relatable, even though he's kind of jerky. He's kind of relatable at the same time. He's not so out there, and you do sympathize with his plight, and like he does really just want to go to school, and he does want to be successful. So you can't really blame him for cooking up these schemes. Yeah, the movie, it takes there's montages and diving sequences and glamorous Morgan Fairchild shows up, like I mentioned, and it's got a lot of the elements and that I like in the films of that era. And it's very, like I said, 1987 is very 80s, and this movie is very 80s in the way it feels and style, and the fashions, and the set design. So I'm totally with it from beginning to end. And I don't know, just one of those movies that's like a comfort watch. Like, you just kind of watch it over and over. It doesn't take a lot to watch it. It's a very easy watch, and it's silly. And I guess some of it you would kind of label them as a sports movie because of the diving stuff, but it's not a sports movie proper. I would just say it's a college comedy, so I lump it in my teen comedy section, which I include college movies in there too. So thank you, Campus Man, for all the memories, and let's go on to the next film. Here we go.
Meet Morgan Stewart. Teenager.
Hey, Dad.
His father ignores him.
Are your folks home?
Thank you, God.
His mother doesn't understand him. His mission is to change the rules.
We are going to be a family if it kills me.
It's Pretty in Pink's John Cryer against the ultimate enemy, his parents.
This is Whitewood. How are you?
Lock the doors, bar the windows, hide your daughters, because Morgan Stewart's coming home.
So that was Morgan Stewart's Coming Home, and starring John Cryer. I believe Morgan Stewart's Coming Home was a movie that might have been made before Pretty in Pink, but it was came out after it and marketed as the new movie starring Ducky or whatever from Pretty in Pink. So a lot like Michael J. Fox with Teen Wolf. Like Teen Wolf was made before Back to the Future, but they end up releasing it after and marketing it as like the next big Michael J. Fox movie. This one though, I don't think was a splash like Teen Wolf or Back to the Future anywhere near it. I'm pretty sure it was like another bomb, like Campus Man. What can you do? These movies are smaller. They're not gonna, they're not huge films. Whatever. I know the original director of the movie. There was like two directors in this movie. Like one replaced the other, and then the person who replaced him didn't like how the movie came out, so he ended up like taking off his name off the movie. And so actually the director credit in this movie is Alan Smithy, which is kind of fun. Anytime I see those, like usually means something went wrong, horribly wrong. But I guess I didn't care about that then when the movie was off, but I did appreciate Morgan Stewart's Coming Home for many reasons. It was a movie about a kid who was underappreciated by his family, and what 12-year-old or teenager couldn't relate to that? I feel like that was a very central theme for a lot of us. And or the opposite, like where some kids are smothered by their by their family. So it all works. He just his politician family basically doesn't want a kid, but he's kind of there for show when they need him. And so when they do need him for a campaign or a re-election, suddenly he has to come home and be part of their life after being in like boarding school for like years and not seeing his family for a really long time. Even at holidays, they always seem to be busy doing something else. And his father's played by Nicholas Pryor. His mom was played by Lynn Redgrave, who's sadly no longer with us, but I love Lynn Redgrave, and she's great in this role. Definitely a driving force in the movie. She's kind of a real bitch, but she's sort of likable in a way. And likable bitch. It's always good. John Cryer, I would say, is relatable in the film. He's kind of geeky, but we've all had our moments. His character is horror obsessed, so those of us who like horror movies can definitely relate to him there. And he has a lot of horror movie posters and paraphernalia, and so it's kind of cool seeing that stuff. And he meets cute with a girl at the mall. He's at the mall, I believe, to get clothing, to get some outfits. His mother wants him to get dressed up, so he goes to the mall, and George Romero happens to be at the mall doing a signing of his book at the time, and so he goes to wait online at the Walden Books. Do you remember Walden Books? Are they still around? I don't think they are, but I remember them very clearly from the 80s. Yeah, especially at the malls, they seem to be very always had a Walden Books at the mall. And so he's doing a signing, and he's waiting online with a bunch of horror fans, and this girl kind of cuts in line. She sees him standing there, and she kind of pretends to be his girlfriend so she can get out of waiting on the really long line to see George Romero. And they kind of meet cute. It's very, very much a meet cute, and they talk about horror movies and how much they love horror movies, and especially black and white horror movies, and how horror films are so pure, and it's such a fun conversation for a teen film. Like, you rarely see like characters who are so like teen films that are obsessed with movies. So, and these two are. It's kind of cute, and definitely those of us who love films can really appreciate that. And so there's a lot of the movie is just him trying to get noticed by his family. There's, all these hijinks of like trying to clean up and overdoing it and get into all these crazy situations, and some hijinks with like the help. which is funny thinking about it now. But he's a good guy ultimately, and you want to see him reunite with his family. You know it's going to happen by the end of the movie, and there's military involved. I believe they want him to go to military school. Paul Gleason is an aide to his father, and I'm not sure if he's his uncle, but he's, he was obviously the assistant principal from The Breakfast Club, and he's basically playing the same character he played all throughout the 80s and even into the 90s. The strict disciplinarian, and he just trying to keep him under lock and key, and at the same time we find out that he's kind of stealing from him or trying to just kind of ruin the family, and so there's a lot of elements of Morgan Stewart's coming home that you can see like why people may think this is a bad movie, because some of the plot points are not really well thought out. So, but that's kind of like what I like about teen comedies. They're kind of scattered and all over the place, and they go from like one set piece to another or one hijink to another, and I don't mind that. I don't mind that the movie doesn't completely work on some levels. Like it's just, it's silly, it's fun, it has relatable characters, and that's what I want in a teen comedy. And I think Morgan Stewart Coming Home is one of the better ones, even if it's not considered that now. So there is that. And Vivica Davis, you're really cute in the movie, like you. So let's go on to our next film.
Nothing like it has ever been on Earth before. We cannot see it, but it sees the heat of our bodies and the heat of our fear. It kills for pleasure. It hunts for sport. But this time, it's picked the wrong man to hunt. He is the ultimate warrior. If he is to destroy it, he must become more than a man, more than an animal. He must become the very spirit of the Predator. Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator. Soon the hunt will begin.
Predator, that's right. We've finally reached the testosterone-filled segment of the podcast. And, wow, Schwarzenegger, Carl Weathers, Bill Duke, Jesse Ventura, Shane Black, I think, was one of the guys, too. That's pretty awesome. Not a big sci-fi guy, admittedly. But, I guess I liked science fiction maybe slightly more when I was 12, or some elements of it in some films. But I think Predator is a bit more than the sci-fi film. Clearly a movie tailor-made for Schwarzenegger, and showing off all the machismo that oozed out of him back in the 80s. And but it was also kind of a horror movie too, in a way. It's kind of like a body count movie, and like the members of the team get killed off one by this predator. So that's kind of cool. I like that element of it. My 12-year-old self was excited to go see it, but more excited at the fact I was going to go see it with like 5 other friends of mine from school, and they were relying on me for this one because I had an in to get to see this movie at the local theater, because I would go to this theater that was literally up the block from where I lived, and I would see movies there all the time, and they knew me, and they let me in to see R-rated movies all the time. So I was the envy of all my friends because I was able to see R-rated movies back then, and so it was up to me to get them in to see Predator, and I got them in, and they were so excited. It was such a big day for everybody. It was in June, I believe, of that year, so school was either over or nearly winding down, and summer was ahead of us, and it was going to be a great summer. We're 12 and things were changing in many ways, and it was exciting to see this big Schwarzenegger movie. Commando had come out already, and a couple other films like Terminator, I'm sure, and Raw Deal. I'm not sure if The Running Man was out. I think Running Man also came out in '87. I'm not sure if that came out that year yet. But so we all liked Schwarzenegger and all his films, and Predator seemed like a lot more fun to be had, and we were excited, and we had a total blast seeing it. We had our popcorn, we had our drinks, we had our candy, and we had Schwarzenegger and his pals, and this Predator, and getting to the chopper, get me to the chopper. I won't do a proper reenactment of that scene because I'm just not very good at at that, but it's a lot of memorable moments in that movie, mostly due to Schwarzenegger and his dialogue readings. It's so much fun, and it holds up. It's a great action movie. John McTiernan was a good director, and he had made one film previous to this one, Nomads, and that was a really weird movie. I saw that in the theater when it came out. I just didn't really know what to make of it. But Predator was pretty assured filmmaking. You knew what you were getting into with that one, and it just kind of had some surprises along the way, and it was just so well made. McTiernan went on to make just 1 year later Die Hard, which many consider one of the best action movies of the 80s, and I totally agree. So he made it kind of back-to-back, Predator and Die Hard. That's pretty awesome. I think he's in jail now, but things happen. I'm not sure if he's out, but you could look that scandal up online if you're not aware of it. But great director of action, and with Schwarzenegger in the 80s, you couldn't really go wrong. He had a couple of films that weren't as big of hits, but I liked a lot of his stuff back in the 80s, and even to this day, I liked The Last Stand. That was a recent movie of his. I enjoy that. I saw Sabotage. So I actually am a loyal Schwarzenegger action movie fan. I go see his movies in theaters still. The same thing for Stallone, or as the Italian director I work with once, he called him Stallone, so I have a habit of calling Stallone too. Schwarzenegger and Stallone are still my 80s action movie pals, and I will go see their movies. So I'm sure you guys are, if you're a fan of action movies, I'm sure you're a fan of Predator, and hopefully you appreciate its horror content too. It's a pretty grisly movie sometimes, and a lot of fun. So go Predator. Predator 2, on the other hand, I can't really defend, so sorry. There's that. Let's go on to our next film. It's a little similar in a way. Here we go.
Mel Gibson's a lethal weapon, a cop who's always giving his partner a hard time.
What you got in there? 4-inch Smith? A lot of old-timers carry those.
And always ready for a good time.
Hey, you want to see Craig? I love this job. This is so exciting.
They say you're the best.
Nobody can touch me.
Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, Lethal Weapon, rated R. Starts Friday, March 6th.
Oh, I think I need some scotch now. After that, I'm going to have some right now. Here we go. That's right, Lethal Weapon, more action. Hope you can handle it. I am a big fan of Lethal Weapon, probably even more so of Lethal Weapon than I am of Predator. I love both a lot, but I think Lethal Weapon had my heart in 1987. I saw when it came out in March, and I was I don't know. Up until then, I wasn't aware of the buddy cop movie. I think it wasn't really a thing then. It just became a thing with Lethal Weapon, and the connection with Lethal Weapon Predator is Shane Black, who was in Predator, was the screenwriter of Lethal Weapon. I think he famously made a bunch of money, but with a screenplay. It was directed by Richard Donner, who I I was aware of in 1987. Strangely, I was aware of some certain directors, not all of them. I knew like Spielberg, and I knew a few others. Like just like knowing like which movie, that filmmaker, like their hallmarks and everything. And I knew Richard Donner, and I knew he directed The Goonies, and I knew he directed Superman and The Omen. So I was excited to see like a new movie by him, and it was just a lot of fun. It was like the things I like about action movies when they're just not just one thing. They're just like a chase movie. They have some humor to them, some dark stuff to them, and Lethal Weapon had all the elements. It had a great chemistry between its two leads. Mel Gibson, who was up until that point was famous for the Mad Max movies, and I guess I was a little lost. The Mad Max movies were a little lost on me by then. I know strange. They were very popular in the 80s, but I just like sci-fi fantasy. That wasn't just my thing, so I think that sort of kind of bordered on that. I guess the futuristic apocalyptic thing I just wasn't into then. And so I wasn't like really aware of Mel Gibson, but I thought he was great in the movie, and Danny Glover. They just were a great match, and obviously this became a very big franchise and very popular franchise of films. I would say it's half of a great franchise. I really like the first two films, and they both came out in the 80s. The last two films, not so sure about. And I saw it a couple of times in the theater, and it was very popular, and people loved it. And it was strange, like where I lived, like the theater, a theater where I lived, played this movie throughout 87 and even maybe even to 1988 as a midnight movie. Strangely, it was always playing Lethal Weapon, and some theaters had Rocky Horror. We had Lethal Weapon, which was very strange, but it was always available to watch, which was awesome. But I did see it a couple times in the theater because I was a fan of it, and I got my fill of action, and I just like some of Richard Donner's touches with some of his camera work. I took kind of notice of like the lens flares, which I know some directors use a lot, maybe too much these days, or some particular directors. I'm not going to cite who they are, J.J. Abrams, but back then, I think also John Carpenter used some sort of technique too in the cinematography. Anyway, I am rambling because there are very striking things about the film, like images from Lethal Weapon that still stick with me, like the suicide early on that always stuck with me, and maybe because the girl was naked and killing herself, it was really weird, and just that the fact that it was just a lot of action in the movie, and a lot of good humor and relatability to the characters. Even though he wasn't like the Mel Gibson character wasn't someone who was just kind of like a good guy, a simple good guy or a bad guy. He was just kind of this guy who went through something pretty traumatic, and he lived on the edge, and I guess we could see part of ourselves in that, like when something bad happens to us and how we feel and how we want to feel, and he kind of lives that life, like it's kind of like how we would want to react to things. Like if something bad happened to us, we just want to just kind of take our aggression out in crazy ways, and maybe I'm just kind of weird that way. It's also a little slapsticky, which is kind of not my thing, but I guess I like slapsticky things more then. The series kind of became very slapsticky, I think, in the later sequels. I know the Gibson character, Riggs character, I was a big fan of like the Looney Tunes cartoons, so maybe that's where some of the slapstick comes in. But yeah, great film, and I am a big fan, and I am so glad Lethal Weapon was a 1987 film, so I could talk about it now. I probably won't have an opportunity to talk about Lethal Weapon 2, but a little bit about Lethal Weapon 2. It's rare that sequels can be as strong as the original. I think Lethal Weapon 2 has a lot of great moments in it, like the first one, and I'm glad that franchise has that. An action franchise. I feel like a lot of the action franchises kind of, and even horror franchises, they kind of dwindle with each movie. But though I love all the big 80s horror franchises, I'm not going to knock any of those. But those first two films, strong. And that's awesome and very unique to the 80s, so we love it. And so I'll have one last bit of scotch for a little while. And I think we should play a song here. I'm going to play a song that was featured in a movie we discussed already. So here we go. Enjoy. Hope you guys are still my friends after all these very 80s songs. But hey, this is a 1987 podcast, so there's going to be some very 80s songs here. And that was Point of No Return by New Shoes. And that was featured in Campus Man during a montage sequence later in the film. So I had to include it here. It's such a fun song, and it's not to be confused with Point of No Return, the Exposé song, which also came out in 1987. So 1987 was definitely a year for the Point of No Return, and much like listening to this podcast. So if you're we're about 40 minutes in, this is the Point of No Return. If you're in now, you're in for the long haul, and I'm so glad you are. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. So we're gonna move on to our next track, our next film, and I hope you like this one. It's a little bit of a different speed. We're moving back away from the action again to something else. Here we go.
Why are so many people drinking Diet Coke and seeing Steve Martin and Daryl Hannah's new movie, Roxane? It's as plain as the nose on your face.
Just for the fun of it, just for the smile of it, Diet Coke. Just for the cool of it, the love of it, the taste of it, Diet Coke. Just for the style of it, Diet Coke. The number one of it, just for the fun of it, Roxane, Diet Coke.
Okay, that was utterly bizarre, I know, but that was a Diet Coke commercial, which was a tie-in for the movie Roxane, starring Steve Martin and Daryl Hannah. It was a really weird, when I looked it up on YouTube, it was a really weird commercial. It's like kind of like a TV screen, and it's like a Diet Coke commercial, but then they show images from the movie. So arbitrarily fit in there, like Roxane, and but that was the 80s for you. I don't remember Diet Coke product placement in the movie, but there probably was some. Roxane is a bona fide romantic comedy, but it's something that maybe I wasn't super into when I was involved in romantic comedies. But this movie really stuck with me. Like, I loved it immediately when it came out. It was in the summer of 87. Like so many of the movies that I love in 87 seem to come out during the summer. And Steve Martin, who I liked up until that point in several films. But I really loved him in this movie. I thought he was really funny and really smart and witty. And, you know, playing the spin on Cyrano de Bergerac, and he wrote the film, and clearly adds a lot to the movie. And Daryl Hannah, who's kind of at first glance she's like the eye candy of the movie, but then like she has a lot to say and do in the movie. She delivers a solid performance even if she's the girl. You immediately like her, and I know it's kind of hard to buy her as a rocket scientist. I feel like a lot of 80s chicks, the pretty 80s blonde chicks, seem to be also scientists of some kind, which is kind of funny. But you know, you like her enough that you buy into it a bit. And Shelley Duvall is like his best friend, and she's always great. I love seeing Shelley Duvall. It had a good supporting cast of some weirdos like Michael J. Pollard and a few others, and it's beginning to end. You know, the comedy. It's a great balance of comedy, and you immediately sympathize with Steve Martin and his problem with his nose and not being noticed by the girl of your dreams, and because of that, and I think that the guy who likes Roxane but can't get the nerve to talk to her because she's a bit intimidating because she's really pretty and smart. Rick Rossovich played him. He was in Top Gun the year before, and he's kind of like he's the male eye candy of the movie, and you know, all the characters work really well together, and they play really well together. So Steve Martin's interactions with him are fun to watch, because I remember one line from the film when the Rick Rossovich character is trying to relay Steve Martin's words back to her, and he just kind of mixes and jumbles them up, and he's like, "Worms, Roxane," instead of words. I find myself saying "worms" in the way he says it in that movie. It's kind of funny. And I like where the movie was shot. I believe it was shot in Vancouver. That's what I want to say, but I think it's supposed to be Northern California. So it's a really striking looking movie, and the cinematography, surprisingly, just very unique looking, beautiful. I'm like, wow, where is this place? I kind of want to live here, this little town. this little firehouse of wacky firemen, and that Steve Martin heads up, and Daryl Hannah's house is really beautiful. I know my co-host Ben Schur always mentions apartments, city apartments, and dwellings of some of the characters in these movies, and this is my bit at mentioning them, because it really struck me, like, I want to live in her house. It's a huge house, and that she rents, and she studies the stars. It's kind of really high up in the hills. Beautiful place, beautiful town. So the movie's gorgeous to look at, whether it's the actors or the scenery. And you have Steve Martin, who's great and funny in this movie, and charming, and the screenplay is so smart and funny. So it's kind of like the perfect romantic comedy. It has so much going for it. So, like I mentioned, I think I mentioned on the Soundtrack podcast, When Harry Met Sally is one of the best romantic comedies, especially for people who aren't into romantic comedies. I would also cite Roxane as well. So if you're not into the genre of romantic comedies, get into these two movies, because I feel like they might change your mind, because there are some great movies that come out of them. And this is that. I love Roxane. I still do, very much. I'm glad it's available. I think it's on Blu-ray, and it looks good. So, yay. Let's move on to our next film. Here we go.
I want this car.
Jonathan Miller would never do anything to break the law.
I need the keys. Thank you. Bye.
He is a very fine, very honest gentleman.
Something strange is happening to some ordinary people.
Yeah, that's Jack. Real nice man. What do you do, rob a bank?
He's a law-abiding taxpayer minding his own business. Killed 12 people, wounded 23 more, stole 6 cars, most of them Ferraris. If anybody deserves to go that way, it sure in the hell's him.
I've worked homicide for 13 years. I have never seen anything like this. You trying to tell me that she's part of this?
Step out of the car slow.
I want answers, and I want them now.
Finds a body, gets inside, uses it to move around.
Try for one on the tire. Do you think this is easy? Why don't you try?
Bye.
I guess a career in the police didn't really prepare you for this, did it?
The hidden.
You think it's over now? You're wrong.
So I wanted to do 2 films from New Line. And the first one, you just heard the trailer, was for The Hidden, the Jack Shoulder sci-fi horror hybrid buddy cop movie. Yeah, it came out and I didn't know anything about it. I don't know if it was lack of advertising or word of mouth or whatever, but I just saw this movie and it was like completely surprised me. It was 1, exciting, 2, scary, creepy, and it just entertained me the hell out of me. There was great music in it, and it just goes out of its way to get you involved in the story of like an alien bounty hunter who teams up with a cop to stop this creature that's kind of inhabiting people's bodies. So that body swap thing that was very popular in the 80s around this time period. I feel like it was at its best with The Hidden. And it was used in other horror movies later on, like in Shocker and a few others, but I really think The Hidden is where it was used best. When the creature inhabits like the old guy, steals the Ferrari, and it's an exciting chase sequence. This is a movie that's like a sci-fi movie, but it has a great car chase sequence, and it has then the creature goes into Claudia Christian, and she's a hot babe, and has some fun moments there. So this has a big sense of humor. It doesn't always. It's not a completely serious movie, which might bog down some of sci-fi for me when it gets a little too serious. I know that's this is sci-fi in general is kind of a serious thing. So, but I appreciate this movie because it works on so many levels. And the great Kyle MacLachlan playing the alien bounty hunter, pretending to be a human or FBI agent, I can't remember, but he teams up with Michael Nouri, and they can make for a good partnership. Michael Nouri is an actor who I don't immediately think of as a cop in movies. I know he's played a cop a few times, but he always seems to, for me, he seems more like like the boss, the guy who's kind of high up on the food chain at the company, and he's always, I know he's played several of those roles, and he's also kind of famous for being a bit difficult on sets. I'm not sure. I think the director had butted heads with Michael Nouri in this movie, if I remember correctly, from listening to the commentary like years ago. But I think they eventually saw eye to eye and worked well together. But I think initially there were some problems, and that happens in film sets. Not everyone's going to agree, and sometimes it's really stressful. And it's amazing, even though through that stress, like a great movie can be made. And I really feel like The Hidden is one of them. It's a real gem, and it took me by surprise in '87. I was excited and scared, so thank you, New Line, for making this film and giving Jack Shoulder, who I feel like should have had a better career. Like, he made some great movies. He made Alone in the Dark, the slasher movie from 1982, great movie, highly recommend it. And Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, which I know has a cult audience, and rightfully so. A lot of fun. And he's made a few other things, but I feel like he was at his peak with a movie like The Hidden. So thank you, Jack Shoulder, and we'd love to see more from you. Get back into the genre. And that was that. So let's move on and try another New Line film. Here it is. You might know this one.
It's 1987. Do you know where Freddy is? There's no waking up from this nightmare. A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 3, Dream Warriors.
Starts Friday, February 27th at a theater near you. Consult local listing.
A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 3, Freddy's back.
That was great. If you've seen 1 and 2, you have to see number 3. Totally bizarre. A total nightmare. It was better than all of them combined.
Freddy's a nut.
Insane!
A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 3, Dream Warriors, rated R.
Now playing at a theater near you.
So speaking of Jack Shoulder and Elm Street 2, we have Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. And I loved this movie when I was 12. Not as crazy about it. I still love the Elm Street series, the first 5 films in particular, the first 4 especially. But I don't know. When I was 12, I just loved it. It was totally geared. These movies are totally geared towards teenagers and adolescents, and especially with 3 onward, I feel like they were really trying to target kids. And it's a movie about kids in trouble and kids in peril, and it totally won me over. And I think I might have mentioned it on a previous podcast, my theater experience. My rock band cousin, who had the dream of being a rock star, took me and my younger sister to see this movie. It was at a packed audience. I believe it was like in February of '87, so pretty early on in the year. And we were just so into it. Everyone was like, the whole audience was so was rolling with laughter during the funny scenes, scared out of their jumping out of their seats during some of the more scary sequences, and the effects worked well then. And it was just kind of a perfect movie-going experience, and it kind of really stuck with me over the years. I think of all the Elm Streets, maybe, Part 3 was definitely my favorite movie-going experience of all the theatrical experiences, which was pretty fun. It's also worth noting that and this movie was scheduled to come out in 86, but I think some production delays pushed into 87, and I'm kind of glad they did, because 1987 didn't have any other big franchise sequels. So we didn't have a Halloween, we didn't have a Friday the 13th in 87, but we had Nightmare on Elm Street 3, so it filled the void, thankfully, and I'm glad they moved into 87. And I am a big fan of this series, and it's kind of Freddy Mania. I mentioned Freddy Mania was a big thing in the 80s before. It just, I think maybe even more so than Michael Myers and Jason in a way. I think Freddy was kind of like really out there in the mainstream, and he was such a character because he could talk, and he was kind of, and I guess he sort of became jokey. I know it's what people hate about some things that people hate about Freddy Krueger, how he became kind of jokey, but he was like an entertainer to me. He was really funny, and I liked him in all his incarnations, whether it be like on a TV series or the commercials and the 900 numbers and the movies and whatever else came after all of that. Freddy was very much alive in the mainstream and in our hearts, and we thank him for that. Dream Warriors bums me out now because it for me, it commits a big sin in a sequel. It commits the sin of taking a heroine who went through so much in a previous installment and then killing her off, and almost kind of unceremoniously. That's the Nancy character, who I feel like was a big deal. Like she was the original survivor of the first film, and then she came back for part 3, and she helps the kids, and then kind of Freddy just takes her out, and it's just kind of sad. It bums me out, and I don't want her to die, because she's great. She has big curly hair, and she's cute, and we love Nancy. Don't die, Nancy. So I don't believe she's dead. Okay, she probably is. That's sad. I'm making a big sad face right now. So yeah, it paves the way for Kristen and her friends, and then I guess Kristen carrying the torch, but whatever. I like Patricia Arquette. I think she's become a good actress, but maybe I wasn't enamored with her as a final girl or whatever in the third film. I actually much prefer the supporting cast in part 3 than I do her. I don't know, something maybe slightly whiny about her character, because I guess she has she's having it rough at home, and her mom's kind of a bitch, and this is kind of, she's always angry at her, and it's not a lot of like levity in her character at all. I much preferred Alice of part 4 and 5. I think Alice kind of had, even though she was the wallflower character, she just kind of had a bit of more of a spark to her, something about her, twinkle in her eye maybe. I liked her a lot. And I like Nancy, and the second one, Jesse, of course, he was fun. And I just can't. It's, for me, I like the first 4 films are great. The fifth one has some issues, but I like some things about it. The 6th one I think was pretty awful. I'm sorry, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. I know I don't want to knock a film, but that was pretty bad. Even though Lisa Zane is kind of sexy in it. And then New Nightmare, which I think is pretty great. And it's kind of hard to even count it as a sequel because it's so postmodern and there's so much going on in it. But and it brings back Nancy, so they did some justice with that one. So thank you, New Nightmare. Thank you, Wes Craven. I think Wes Craven had written original screenplay for Part 3, and they decided to have go a different direction and have writers come in and change some of his work. I think Frank Darabont might have been one of those writers, and obviously he's gone on to bigger things. But I like what they came up with. I do think it's not as strong as some of the other ones, because maybe it's aged not as well. But there's some elements of it that I really like, and I like the idea of the kids in the hospital, and I just wish they weren't killed off. I like them. Oh well, what can you do? That's a slasher movie for you. They gotta tie off, aren't they? So that was the two films from New Line that I liked a lot in 1987, and it's kind of sad that New Line isn't around really anymore. I wish they were. They were putting out some quality entertainment in the 80s and 90s. Miss you, New Line. Love you. So let's play a song, and I think if you liked the movie we just discussed, you'll like this song. Here it goes. You probably know what it is already. I'm back. Hope you enjoyed some Doc in there with Dream Warriors. So let's go on to our next film. I'm going to change it up a bit, and hopefully you're a fan. Here we go.
Test pilot Tuck Pendleton wants to make history. Supermarket clerk Jack Putter needs a vacation.
Jack, you're late. That's not good. You know it's coupon day.
Lieutenant Pendleton is about to be miniaturized, placed into this needle, and then injected into this rabbit.
Rock and roll.
But something went wrong, and Tuck's about to get a new destination. Inside Jack Putter.
I'm not a man.
Hello, can you hear me?
I'm possessed!
Now, Jack's got twice the problems.
How you doing, Jack?
But he's double the man. With Tuck on his side.
Kicking more accounts!
In his gut. And on his case.
You're not gonna bag groceries all your life, are you, Jack?
And only 24 hours left for Jack to get out of danger. So that Tuck can get out of Jack. Dennis Quaid, Martin Short. Give yourself a shot of adventure. Inner Space.
Inner Space. Before we get into it, I just want to mention that I left a few films off this list because I covered them before on a previous podcast. The Touchstone podcast in particular had several 1987 films, like Can't Buy Me Love, Outrageous Fortune, Stakeout, Hello Again, movies I loved, and especially Adventures in Babysitting, which I would say was my favorite movie of 1987 and my favorite movie for a long time. That's up there with Just One of the Guys. I think Adventures in Babysitting was my favorite movie, and then I kind of like, and then it became Just One of the Guys of all time. So quite a few movies, and then a couple of others which I plan on doing in future podcasts. So I'm not going to say what they are, only because I am not sure when this is going out, if this is going out before another podcast that I'm planning or not. So there's a couple of titles that in particular that I really loved, and I wish were on this list, but will be on a future list and on past lists. So enjoy. Inner Space is a movie I really loved in '87. A Joe Dante film. Now, let me tell you about this guy, Joe Dante. He's made some really great films in his career, and like Gremlins and Gremlins 2, which I think is a pretty underrated sequel. The Burbs, The Howling. I can go on. This guy's made a lot of gems in his career, and he's still making movies. Not as much as he used to, but he also has his Trailers from Hell website, which I highly recommend you guys checking out. Lots of fun to be had on there. He's done a lot of things that mean a lot to me, and I count Inner Space as one of them. I know it's not. It's like a fantasy film, which I know I said before that I'm not into, but there are actually quite a few 80s fantasy films that or sci-fi fantasy films that I like. I think it's because they combine like comedy, and because I was so big on comedies in '87, much more than horror, because horror kind of wasn't. You've noticed there's not a lot of horror on this list because horror was not really where it was in the early '80s as it was in '87. Horror was in a different place. And it was transitioning, and it was becoming like very effects heavy and other things. So I wasn't as big of a fan of horror in the year of '87. I think later in '80s I might have been warmed up to other things, like especially as more things were coming out on video, as I was going to the video store more often in 87, 88, 89, 88, 89 especially. And so I was really into horror and finding all these horror gems. But so I was really into comedy and adventure, and then I guess there's some sci-fi in it. And it has those elements brought together with a really engaging cast. led by Martin Short, Dennis Quaid, and Meg Ryan, who I don't think was billed at all in the trailer, which I think now she would have been, because she's since become a big star, and actually her star has fallen, which is sad, but that's what happens in Hollywood. But they were great together, all three of them. All three leads have a great chemistry with each other. And it's funny because Dennis Quaid spends most of the movie away from the characters, as his character was miniaturized and put inside of Martin Short, excuse me. So it's a funny way of working. I don't know how they actually work together. If it was a lot of like listening to each other's dialogue and playback or not, but they worked well together, even if they were off screen most of the time. And I think Meg Ryan, when she shows up, she was in Top Gun the year before, and I had noticed her previously from Amityville 3D. I think she was kind of the standout in that movie for me. Her character was really weird, and she wanted to play Ouija in the house, and that always stuck with me. And then she was like the girl in Top Gun, the one that was married to Anthony Edwards, Goose. And so she kind of like had a breakout in that movie, and then she was in this movie, Dennis Quaid, and they hooked up and got married, had kids, and divorced since then. So they had a little run of a couple of movies. DOA, I think DOA was the other one after this one. And they make a good couple, and they're fun together. But I kind of enjoy. Interestingly enough, I enjoy the chemistry between Meg Ryan and Martin Short. They have some great moments together. I know Martin Short plays this kind of hapless, bumbling fool, kind of the shtick that he's kind of known for throughout the 80s, and but they generate some genuine chemistry in the film, and I think it's cute that he likes her, but she obviously is more interested in Tuck Pendleton, played by Dennis Quaid, and trying to help him out, and they're evading bad guys. There's mistake. There's that whole like pretending to be somebody else, the identity thing that I like in the 80s. So there's a lot of fun elements going on. It's a very busy movie, a lot going on. There's a lot of special effects with the miniaturization, and it has all these elements, but I don't know, it comes together for me so perfectly in this movie. And I think Joe Dante is the reason. He just he's a very good director of actors. I know that's something he's not really known for, but I think he lets them do their thing, lets their charm come through, and then he adds his own touches. And he's a famous kind of movie geek, and there's a lot of references to other older movies and sci-fi movies, and that's fun. And actors, his has like a stock characters that he uses, actors he uses that are in older films, like Roger Corman films and other things, and they show up in little bit parts. Especially I enjoyed the scene in the restroom when Martin Short was talking to Tuck, who's inside of his body at this point, and some guy watches him talk, and he's like at the urinal, Martin Short, and he's talking, and he's looking down, and the guy thinks I think he says something along the lines of play with it, pal, don't talk to it, or something. And that always struck a chord with me. I guess it was a 12-year-old kid, like kind of funny, and there's some really silly moments, and which I do appreciate. My 12-year-old self and my current old self. So I think Inner Space has definitely stood the test of time, and I like to watch it, and I'm glad it's available on DVD. I don't think it's been available on Blu-ray yet, and I would like to see it on Blu-ray, because that's like a widescreen movie. I think it might have been shot in anamorphic widescreen. So I think actually the video, if I remember correctly now, the VHS copy was one of the first VHS movies that I remember was actually presented in widescreen. So they kind of forced people to watch this movie in widescreen on VHS, which was interesting back then because no one was really doing that. Everybody was like formatting things for 4x3 TVs, and defiantly they they made people watch this movie in widescreen, which is interesting because the movie actually should be. It's beautifully shot and well done. So I'm glad they did that, and I'm glad people have widescreen TVs now and can see movies the way they were meant to be seen. Joe Dante leading the way. Thank you, Joe Dante. And Inner Space. Let's move on to our next film.
Didn't you ever have guys at your school that didn't fit in? Well, I'm one of those guys.
The only things I care about in this life are me and my drums and you.
She's the trash, you're just a fool.
What do you want?
I want you to beg.
What they found in each other was the courage to find themselves. Some Kind of Wonderful. A John Hughes production, directed by Howard Deutsch, rated PG-13. Special sneak preview, Saturday, February 21st.
Wow, February 21st. So I guess as well as a lot of my favorite movies being released in the summer, a lot of them were released early on in the year too. That was Some Kind of Wonderful, the John Hughes written film, Howard Deutsch directed. And I have to say, Some Kind of Wonderful is my favorite of the John Hughes movies from the 80s. Especially the teen movies. I love this movie so much, and I instantly loved it when it came out in 87. I was already a fan of John Hughes then. I had seen The Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink and 16 Candles and Weird Science, and I know and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, of course. I loved all of those movies in different ways. I probably didn't appreciate 16 Candles as much as I do now. I know I loved Weird Science. Really loved Weird Science. Probably watched that one the most of the John Hughes movies of the 80s, in the 80s. It had endless replay value. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I appreciated much more then than I do now. And Breakfast Club I really liked, and even though I wasn't their age, I totally kind of got it anyway, and liked those characters, very engaging. But Pretty in Pink I liked, and I still like the film. I really like Pretty in Pink, but I think it does have some issues, and the major issue with Pretty in Pink for me is the ending, and the ending was famously reshot by the studio because they felt that teenage girls especially would not appreciate that Andrew McCarthy does not end up with Molly Ringwald, and then she kind of does not get back with him, and so they reshot the ending where she goes to the prom with Ducky, and they kind of dance the night away and have fun, and they reshot it so that she goes running back to Blaine and the whole sequence, and I just always found that to be super lame. So I feel like Some Kind of Wonderful, I know other people feel this way as well, makes up for the fact that they ruined the previous film with a bad ending, and the right guy ends up with the right girl, and for the right reasons. Especially, it's not just the pairing off is not as important to me in movies, because it's so like arbitrary in most romances, and especially in TV, and just like movies too, especially it's just the pairing off is just annoying, and the characters have to end up together for some reason, just because most of the time because they're there, and if there's a TV show. But I feel like what Some Kind of Wonderful does is they create these characters that you like. They're likable, they have real emotions, and there's a lot of honesty there, and then they're together for absolutely the right reasons at the end of the movie. There is a lot of feelings between Keith and Watts, and she's not just the wallflower. She's not the Carrie. She's not going to be rolled over by other people. she fights for what she wants, and she tries her best, and though Keith is blindsided by what he thinks is love with Leah Thompson's character. It's just an interesting love triangle. I think it's as close to a great teen romance as you're going to get in the 80s. Because it's just, we like all three of them, and we identify with them for different reasons, and they're not just rich kids who have money, and there's not a lot of consequence in their actions. A lot of what they do means a lot, and they're kids who are in their senior year of high school, college is approaching, their lives are changing, and they want to be happy, and it's interesting where the movie goes by the end, and it's you hope at least that it's not going to have the pretty and pink ending where Keith wants to be with Leah Thompson and because they're in love or whatever, and I could imagine revisiting Molly Ringwald and Andrew McCarthy's Blaine, Pretty in Pink. That relationship was over by the time they were in college. Just saying. But I do imagine that Keith and Watts are together and very happy all these years later. Oh my God. Some Kind of Wonderful. 1987 is 27 years ago, kids. That's a long time, and they probably have a kid who's in college by now. The characters, it's crazy to think that. It's a long time ago, but I can go right back to 1987 in an instant in my mind. Such a great year, and a great year for films like this. John Hughes sadly is no longer with us, but he left behind some great movies, whether they be the teen films or some of the ones with the adults, but I do prefer the teen movies myself. That's just me. And Some Kind of Wonderful, I feel like did not get as much love in 1987 as it did, as it does now. I hope it does get the love. It really deserves it. It's interesting, the film, watching it, and my wife is a huge fan of this film as well. She grew up in Southern California, and the film does have more of a California vibe than any of the John Hughes films prior, and that's interesting because all of his films were set in Chicago or suburbs of Chicago, but this one was more of a California movie, and that gives it a different vibe. There's a different the movie was shot a bit differently than some of the other ones, and there's a different look and feel and glow to it, and I think it's just a great movie to look at, and of course the soundtrack. Pretty in Pink had an amazing soundtrack, but I love this one even more. So many great songs. I've picked a couple, maybe one or two of the songs on our soundtrack podcast, and I'm sure there'll be more songs picked. Great soundtrack and match a great film. So it's, to me, Some Kind of Wonderful is a teen movie, John Hughes perfection. Love it. Hope you do too. And let's do something different. Let's play a song from 1987 that wasn't in a soundtrack. I just want to give you a general idea of like what the year was and what it felt like. And here's a song that I like a lot that doesn't get a lot of play. Here it is. So that was the Pet Shop Boys and Dusty Springfield with What Have I Done to Deserve This? That's from their Actually album, which was released in in 87. And it was a big hit on the UK charts. I believe it was number 2 in the Billboard Top 100. But it didn't really... it wasn't as big in the U.S. as it was, obviously, in the U.K. And it's an important song because it helped revive Dusty Springfield's career. It's a great song, and I wish it was in a soundtrack. They also had on that album they had "It's a Sin," which is a really good song, and a lot of great songs. So I am a fan of the Pet Shop Boys, even if they weren't as big in the U.S. as they were in the U.K. They crossed over to my heart. And so I hope you enjoyed that, and let's move on to our next film. Here goes.
You know what we need? I mean, besides bread, we need a woman who appreciates what we have to offer.
Freddie Shoup loves to cut class, hates to do homework, lives for summer vacation.
But Freddie, you're a semi-charming guy and a real snappy dresser. You're just not the kind of guy I date anymore.
Yeah? What kind of guy you dating now?
Oh, the kind who wears socks.
And the only reason he hasn't been expelled yet is because he's the gym teacher.
Oh, Mr. Shoup.
At Oceanfront High.
Congratulations. You've been chosen to teach summer school. No, I'm not a real teacher. That's all right. These aren't real students. They're unmotivated, irresponsible, not too bright. They'll relate to you. You in this class, too? I'm teaching it.
No way!
Right off the bat, you show them who's in charge. Please take your seats.
Where should we take him?
Who is in charge?
I recommend this time I pass.
You're gonna do well, Jerome. I can feel it.
I've seen some of your students. Very scary.
There's a very valid reason for summer vacation. The human brain needs rest.
I know you guys aren't exactly fired up about English, but we're stuck here. We're trapped, like rats.
Tension breaker had to be done.
Mark Harmon.
You need an intelligent, sensitive man who can skate.
Kirstie Alley.
Do you know such a guy?
Oh, they're hard to find.
And the Oceanfront High summer school class of 87.
They're as smart as you and me. You and I. All of us.
Paramount Pictures presents a new film by Carl Reiner, Summer School.
I love this film. It had passion and a plucky spirit. Dave, I agree with you. Thumbs up from me. Same here. To sum it up, I'm Chainsaw. I'm Dave. We'll see you at the movies.
Summer School. Had to. Of course I had to. Who doesn't love Summer School? I can't imagine. To find out the nature of a person, you ask them, have you seen Summer School? And if they said yes, did you like Summer School? If they say no, then you run away from that person really fast, because Summer School is one of the most likable movies I've ever seen. The tale of a teacher named Shoup who wants to escape his job and go to Hawaii for the summer with his girlfriend, and she backs out, and then he gets stuck teaching summer school for the summer, and of course he gets stuck with like the worst kids academically, but oh my gosh, aren't they a bunch of lovable kids in a movie? Wacky, zany. There are Chainsaw and Dave. I have to mention them first. Who doesn't love Chainsaw and Dave? Horror obsessed kids. So we have on this list so far, we have had Chainsaw and Dave, and we have John Cryer and Morgan Stewart. So we've had some horror kids, which is got to show some love to them. They love movies, and it does affect their studies. They don't have a lot of drive to learn, but Shoup gets him to come around after a while. After many zany misadventures, he gets these kids to learn. The girl who doesn't know how to drive, but she's also dyslexic, I believe. There's the kid who is sleeping in class all the time, and it's revealed that he's sleeping in class all the time because he's a stripper. That happens to all of us. I know it happens to me all the time. I'm always falling asleep because of my night job as a stripper. Also, you have the foreign exchange student, the hot foreign exchange student who is causing all sorts of trouble with the boys, a certain kind of trouble. And then you have the Courtney Thorne-Smith surfer gal who has the hots for Shoop, and she kind of wants to get move into his life, and you have Shoop himself, and you have Kirstie Alley, and their whole love, burgeoning love. She's it's that great 30s screwball comedy repertoire between the two of them, hate each other, love each other thing, and Carl Reiner directed this film, and he obviously has an appreciation for older comedies, and you can shine through in this 80s teen movie. So he's a very interesting choice to direct a teen movie, because there's a lot of old school comedy going on behind the silliness and zaniness of the 80s exterior. So that's kind of a cool combination. It reminded me actually of the previous year, Back to School, 1986. It was another movie kind of like that. There's a lot of 80s going on, but there's also a lot of classic comedy in there as well. And I love these two movies, absolutely. I'm sure I'm leaving out some of the kids, and I feel bad for some of you who I'm leaving out, but I love them all. The squeaky kid, the squeaky dorky kid, who strangely keeps failing, even though he's should be a nerd. And especially in a movie like this, he would be the nerd character who's really smart, but he has his problems as well. And so they go on all these adventures. He sends them on a series of field trips instead of actually wanting to teach them. But then a lot of it's like very character driven. He has to come around, he has to learn, and he has to develop a passion for teaching, which was lost on him for so long, being burnt out. I can imagine being a teacher for a long time. You might be burnt out after a while. So like I said, it's all character driven in this movie, and everyone's likable, lovable. And the movie has at times raunchy, edgy humor, so that's thrown in there, and there's a lot going on, and a love story too. So, kind of Summer School is another movie perfection. You have to love it. I don't want to hear that you hate it. Please, I'm covering my ears if you do, and I don't want to see you right now. So, hope you enjoyed Summer School. I'm not going to go on about it because the people who are fans of that movie will always love it to death, and part of why we love it to death is because it's so easy to watch. It's so comfortable and so much fun from beginning to end. Thank you, Summer School, and Carl Reiner, and Mark Harmon, who is now famous for some shitty show on CBS that everyone in this country seems to watch, but I don't really watch it because I'm not quite a senior citizen yet. I forgot the name of it. But back in the 80s, he was, I guess, considered studly, and I know my sister liked him, and a lot of the chicks liked him, and I could see why. He's a good-looking man. And he has great chemistry with Kirstie Alley. They were in a couple movies together. I can't remember. The other one was like the Prince of Bel-Air or something. Not the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but it was actually called, I think it was called the Prince of Bel-Air or something like that. I remember it coming out around the same time. Maybe it was made before. I don't know. They cashed in on their success with this movie. This was a big hit, and with a good reason. Great stuff. Let's move on to our next film.
Once upon a time, in a land called Beverly Hills, there lived a spoiled princess
It's the Beaujolais Nouveau.
who had it all.
Don't worry, I have a case.
Her carriage was a cherry red Mercedes. Every night she had a ball. Every day her daddy paid.
Dad, please, I'm zeroed out.
I gave you 200.
Well, it's ancient history.
I believe it was lunchtime.
And then one day, fate stepped in.
You're making a big mistake. See, I'm rich.
And something extraordinary happened.
Who are you?
I'm your fairy godmother. As of 5 minutes ago, the old Jesse Montgomery ceased to exist.
All right, look, it's a great joke. It's really funny. I've learned my lesson. Daddy, some fairy godmother you are. I thought you guys were supposed to turn maids into princesses.
Some princesses deserve to be maids.
Now the spoiled princess from Beverly Hills is about to become
I did not spend 6 years in junior college to be a maid.
the newest maid in Malibu.
You're kidding.
I give her 24 hours tops.
Who is this?
That's the new maid.
What have you done to my wrinkled suit?
Pressed it.
I bought it wrinkled. It's a Giorgio Armano wrinkle.
She used to have it made.
You're the new maid.
Not really.
That's what I've heard.
But now, she's made to order. Ali Sheedy, Valerie Perrine, Dick Shawn, Beverly D'Angelo, Michael Onkeen, Tom Skerritt.
Fairy godmother, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be boring. Help me, fairy godmother, please.
Made to order.
I want to be a cleanup woman one day. That, of course, was Made to Order with Ali Sheedy. Not a movie that's universally loved. I don't think it was a hit at all, the box office, but I saw it at the movie theater in the summer of '87, and I was very happy when I saw it, and I had a big smile on my face when it was over. Total, like, fairy tale, but a very 1987 fairy tale with Ali Sheedy as a spoiled brat who needs to learn a lesson or two about life, and those of us who are spoiled brats, don't we all need to learn a lesson? So she becomes this maid, and she needs to. She doesn't know that she has to be nice to be able to go back to her old life, but so she kind of her character through the series of unfortunate incidents and becoming this maid to a wealthy family played by Dick Shawn and Valerie Perrine. She learns some hard lessons about life and love as she becomes attracted to Michael Onkeen, the butler, and who wouldn't be attracted to Michael Onkeen, the butler, with his chauffeur ways. Actually, he's the driver, so she falls with the driver and his chauffeur ways and his mullets and his gift for playing the piano and being a composer. So of course she falls hard for him or something like that. And we can't forget that her fairy godmother is Beverly D'Angelo, a chain-smoking fairy godmother who kind of has a mean streak about her, which is very interesting. This movie was written and directed by Amy Holden Jones, who had previously made The Slumber Party Massacre. So you horror kids out there have seen that one, right? And she wrote and directed a movie called Love Letters, which was right after Slumber Party Massacre, which starred our favorite on the podcast, Jamie Lee Curtis. And she's done other things. She's written other screenplays. She might have directed some other films, but Made to Order was a favorite of mine and still is a favorite of mine. Why I like this movie? It's not like a movie a guy would generally be into. You think it's a movie tailor-made for... I know this is being kind of horrible and by saying that it's made for girls or women, but it has a lot going on for me to enjoy, especially the characters. What a kooky bunch. You have Dick Shawn and Valerie Perrine, who are insane in their 80s-ness. They kind of reminded me of the rich couples, like in Down and Out in Beverly Hills and other movies, but they're just taken to whole nother level of craziness. And you have the staff at the house, and none other than Mary Clayton as the cook, the boozy cook, who had a promising career at being in an all-girl group in the 60s, but then ruined it by her elbow problem, as she says in the film. She bends it too much. She keeps drinking that bottle. She takes it home every night, every weekend, her booze, and so she, we all have dreams, and her dreams are dashed by whatever problems we've had in our lives, and that's her demon that she faces all the time. And and then you have the daughter character, the daughter of the rich family. I think Rain Phoenix, River Phoenix's sister, plays her, and she's just, I think she's kind of short. Given she's not given as much to do in the movie, so I felt like maybe her character was a bit more developed at some point, or was edited out or something, which is sad. There could have been more moments with her bonding, because you can kind of tell that she sort of had a character arc where she had problems with her family, her family not understanding her, and then at the end they kind of make that up to her in a way. So. And then you have the rock singer dude, who actually is the same guy who was in, I believe, My Chauffeur. He was the punk rock singer in that movie. The band was called Catfight or something. And I'm not sure what that guy's story is. I should look him up and see, maybe he was a guy who was in a band or whatever. But part of the magic of the movie is that it's a fairy tale, and a very 80s fairy tale, and so you have things like a rock singer, punk rock singer who likes to throw meat at the audience, dude, and you have the elements of Ali Sheedy, who's this real princess who before she goes through her transformation, she likes to go to clubs, booze it up with total strangers, and spend hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars on alcohol and food, and just let her dad pay the bill, flip the bill, and she goes to clubs. There's a scene where she goes to a goth club, and I think they're playing Spirit in the Sky or something, and that was kind of cool. A very 80s vibe, and until it goes into the when she becomes the maid, which I loved about it. Very LA 80s. She has a friend, I want to say her name is Kimmy, who was the actress from Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, the final girl from that. She was also in Roller Boogie. She was her friend Kimmy, and she's kind of the bitchy friend who, when Ali Sheedy, her life changes, and her fairy godmother makes everyone forget she ever existed, including her dad, played by, who I left out already, Tom Skerritt. She goes to Kimmy and tries to get her to help her, but Kimmy thinks she's some crazy homeless person. She tells her to get off her car, and something about watch the paint, sister, and she says as she drives off in her fancy convertible. Tom Skerritt, who I liked a lot in the 80s. I think he is a good guy, always dependable in movies. Poltergeist 3, which we covered on our previous podcast, he was in a movie called Fighting Back from 1982, an exploitation movie from Paramount, kind of in the vein of Death Wish, about a Philly town that gets... where the crime is out of control, that the residents have to kind of fight back themselves. I think it was a really cool movie. He was in tons of things, and he's good as the father. You can understand why. I mean, I guess you raise a daughter, and then she kind of grows up to be like this bitchy, ungracious Ali Sheedy. So you're disappointed in her, disappointed in yourself. He plays some of those emotions well. I just, absolutely adore this movie. I can't say enough about it. Just like scene after scene. I like the music in the movie. I like that Mary Clayton gets to sing, and she has a couple of moments. I like that Michael Onken gets to like do his piano thing. I don't know if he's really playing the piano. Probably looks like he's faking it, but whatever. That's cool. And all the characters get to shine. Those of you who've seen the film know what I mean by I Could Still Shine. With that song that plays. So there's like, I guess, a corniness underneath some of it, but I don't mind going there with corny. I don't mind it at all. I have a problem with maybe more modern corny, I guess, but I guess 80s corny is totally good with me. And maybe Made to Order kind of follows some of that, but I'm not going to talk bad about any of that because I like my corniness. I like romantic comedies that are also like fairy tales about coked up princesses and chain smoking fairy godmothers. That's what I like. And this is a movie that's very high up on my list. I would say this is number 2, because I had just such fun watching it. I saw it 3 times, I think, when it came out in the theater, and very much on VHS, and so it got a lot of play. It was from the Vista Group studio that doesn't exist anymore. They were kind of small back then in the 80s, and released a couple films. I think they might have released... they released Fright Night Part 2 later in 89. That didn't do very well for them. So they kind of, by 1989 or early 90s, they were gone. But I was a fan of some of the few movies that they put out. I had 3 for the Road in 1986. I remember that one. They put out that as well. I'm sure quite a few other films that I'm forgetting, but this is really off the top of my head. Made to Order and Ali Sheedy, I haven't really discussed. I was a big fan of Ali Sheedy in the 80s. I'm not sure how you feel about her. I watched her in quite a few films. First caught my attention, I believe, in War Games. I know she was in War Games and Bad Boys around the same time. Maybe Bad Boys first. I can't remember. But I remember seeing War Games in the theater and liking her. And you can see why the guy, Matthew Broderick, likes her. She has like a girl next door quality about her. And instantly likable. And then she, of course, went on to like The Breakfast Club and St. Elmo's Fire. And then Short Circuit in 86. Can't forget Short Circuit. So I really liked her in that as well. And something about her look kind of changed later in the 80s, and maybe not as cute, but I still really liked her. And I hope she does stage another kind of comeback. She had a sort of a comeback in the late 90s when she did High Art, that lesbian drama, which I thought was amazing, and she was really good in it. And I kind of hope she does kind of a comeback again. I'd like to see her in more things. So Ali Sheedy, this one's for you. Made to Order. Thank you for providing me so much entertainment in the 80s, and with your likability and your presence. So that was my number 2. what should we do next? Shall we play some music? One more song, and then we'll get to my number one pick that isn't Adventures in Babysitting. So let's do that. Let's play a song. Here it is. So that was Alicia with Do You Dream About Me, which is the perfect segue to our number one pick because it was prominently featured in this movie, Mannequin. Yes, that's right. Mannequin was my number one pick for 1987. It's a movie I absolutely adored when it came out, I believe in February of that year. And a movie my sister and I would watch a lot on video subsequently. We first saw it in the theater, and it was just like a fun time at the movies together. I believe I took her. And then when it came out on home video, we'd watch it all the time. So one of our bonding movies, but we just had a lot of fun with it. My sister, I believe, had a crush not only on Mark Harmon, but on Andrew McCarthy, and I did not maybe understand that one at all. since Blaine of Pretty in Pink was pretty bland. But he had more spark and personality in this one, and I think he did in other later films like Weekend at Bernie's and other stuff. But so Andrew McCarthy and Kim Cattrall as the title character, the mannequin, make a great pair in this movie. Set at a department store. We love movies set at malls and department stores, and this is the movie that was set at one in Philadelphia, a big old, I think it was like a Macy's or something like that, in Philly. They actually shot at an old department store, which I don't think is around anymore, sadly. Or maybe it is still around, but it's not in the same capacity as it once was, which is sad. It's a grand place, Prince and Company in the film, and you have the character of Jonathan Switcher, played by Andrew McCarthy, who is an artist at heart, but being an artist doesn't necessarily pay the bills. So he goes on a series of job misadventures and wackiness does ensue. This is a very silly movie, so it completely would appeal to a 12-year-old boy or a 12-year-old girl, or my sister was 10 at the time. You could see why we would love it and watch it all the time. And it has some great actors in it. Kim Cattrall, I think, is really good. I think she's a great actress, a fun actress to watch in movies and on TV shows. Likeable, and an energy about her that's fun, and a wit. And you can see she's kind of witty, and she's given some good stuff to chew on in Mannequin. And then we have James Spader as kind of the villain of the piece. Him and the guy who runs a department store across the street and wants to put them out of business. And James Spader's working from the inside at Prince & Company to try to destroy the company. But then that pesky mannequin gets in the way. Can I just say that the big element of this movie is obviously the chemistry between the two leads, and his plight of falling in love with his art, but also the story of Jonathan Switcher and Meshach Taylor's Hollywood. Of course, I have to mention Hollywood. He's a big element of why this movie is a lot of fun. Borders on there's definitely, it's a very campy role, and as portrayed by Meshach Taylor, and borders on being offensive to some. I think the people who I know who are gay really like Mannequin, and I can. It's a silly movie that has its foundation set in like early 30s and 30s comedies, and you know how much I love those, obviously, but a very 80s silly vibe to it, and like I don't think you could take it all too seriously if you start picking apart why a movie is offensive for like arbitrary reasons or seemingly important reasons. I just think you just need to enjoy a movie on a certain level, and I think Mannequin is one of those movies. It's not pretentious at all. There's nothing about this movie that will I think offends you unless you are just offended by movies that don't take themselves too seriously. Maybe that could be a problem for you. It's not. Not an amazing movie. It's not like it's a near Oscar winner. As on the top of the podcast, Starship's Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now was nominated for an Academy Award, but the movie itself is not an Oscar movie. It's not The Last Emperor. It's not going to win a bunch of awards. And thank God. I don't want award-winning movies in my life all the time. I mean, there's enough of them, especially these days when every movie has to be either a masterpiece of cinema or a huge blockbuster. There's no in-betweens. Mannequin, I guess, is an in-between movie. A movie that was a hit because regardless of everything, it was a small budget movie. It wasn't like something that was gonna be a blockbuster or set out to be a blockbuster, but it made a lot of money for a small... I think it was Gladden was the original distributor, and I think they might have been picked up by Fox as a distributor for theatrical, but it was made independently, the film, and amazing. The 80s, you could have an independent movie and just be a big hit and not be like something like today where it's like shot on a handheld camera. It's a real film, and there's enough going on in it to make you really happy, I think, if you have an open heart, and if your heart isn't made out of plastic, molded plastic. I played the Alicia song because it occurs during a sequence in the movie that I absolutely love. It's like the montage sequence where they're in the department store late at night, and they're trying on outfits, and they're just going a series of like music videos. This is a movie that stops and takes its time to become a music video for like 4 minutes, which is amazing to me. I love when a movie can do like a dance sequence, just stop and become like a dance sequence, and this movie just does that, but in like an MTV music style, almost literally during the elevator bit where they're pretending to be rock stars, and she's like a dancer in the music video. I think that was hilarious, in her wig and her black tight outfit, and just all those moments in the mall together, and then how can I forget like the glamorous windows that Kim Cattrall comes up with and Jonathan comes up with, which is what leads him to success in the company, because she helps him with these windows, and they're the sensation of Philadelphia, and everyone wants to see them. They're fun to look at. Maybe not as grand to watch now as they were in the 80s, but I don't know. It's a movie that's kind of hard to really defend, other than just you either love it or you don't. So there's that. Do you love Mannequin? Can I say that I also love Mannequin 2 on the Move? I'll even raise up the ante there. Yes, Mannequin 2 on the Move from 1981. I'm a big fan of as well. It's like saying I like Weekend at Bernie's too, which I kind of did. I remember when I saw it in the theater, but I like the Mannequin movies more than I like the Weekend at Bernie's movies. Andrew McCarthy, like I said, was a little bland in his early career, but he's likable here, and I think those of us into movies kind of have bond with the characters, kind of somewhat artistic or creative minded, and had aspirations of being a writer. So I liked his character, and also in St. Elmo's Fire, who was kind of like the writer. So I liked him in that. I liked him in this. So I kind of bonded with him in the movie, and thought Kim Cattrall was really cute and sexy, and just laughed a lot and had fun. That's Mannequin to me. A year I will treasure forever. I think to best get my take on 1987, especially when it's with regards to movies. I wrote an essay a few years back, and I'm going to read it. So here goes. It's entitled Summer 1987. Summer 1987, August 17 to be exact. I remember this because it was one day before my 12th birthday. I had just treated myself to go see Adventures in Babysitting for the 4th time that summer. I went on to see it at least 2 more times. And as I exited the movie theater, I noticed Susan strolling by. That particular time in summer, there was a street festival going on, and being that it was in Bensonhurst, it was a very big event. Summer was usually culminated in this festival, and even though it had begun as a Catholic tradition, it was a free-for-all, an excuse just to walk in the street. Screw the cars. Tons of people were everywhere, shopping at the makeshift stalls and picking up endless treats to eat. Sausages and an Italian-American doughy dessert called zeppoli seemed to be the thing to have. Through those stampeding crowds, I still managed to notice Susan walking by. Perhaps it was my soon-to-be 12-year-old brain feeling woozy from the darkened theater's delights, but I quickly decided to follow her to wherever she was going. This is where I just admitted to stalking a girl that I had a crush on all summer long. Heck, all year long, as she was in my homeroom and most of my classes that year at Seth Low Junior High School in Brooklyn, New York, USA. It could be that I confused Susan's charms with that of new burgeoning movie star Elizabeth Shue, aka she who had kicked a soccer ball to my head and awoke the beast within from The Karate Kid. In my favorite picture of that year that I went to seemingly all the time, they shared similar looks as both sported curly, dirty blonde tresses and a kind of general girl next door vibe. I was almost 12. Give me a break. I weaved in and out of this human traffic, narrowly avoiding being clobbered by the meatheads and the huge hair they call girlfriends who seemed to be everywhere. I ducked behind stalls and whirly-twirly kiddie rides, hoping she wouldn't know I was reimagining the Police's Every Breath You Take music video right behind her. I came close a couple of times because her friend, whose name I forget, and you'll learn that I'm very good at this, almost spotted me when I got way too close for comfort. God, I used to love that show. Anyway, she made her way through the festival and down the street, and I watched as she parted ways with her friend. She had then ducked into a house that I eventually learned was where she lived. I suppose I should have felt sleazy following her home, but my only intention was to work up some courage and ask her out. I never did, though we eventually became minor friends for a short period of time. I think I was just fodder until her usual friends came along and onto the scene. It probably didn't help that the only fight I ever got into throughout my entire adolescence existence involved a softball and Susan's twin brother just 2 months prior. I believe that particular day I was full of testosterone because I had seen Predator with 4 of my friends, none of whom I could seem to picture in my head anymore, let alone their names. I do, however, recall seeing Predator opening day, June 12th of that year. I remember my friends being so utterly psyched that we were able to see an R-rated film without parents around. Little did they realize by June 12th, 1987, I was already a master of being able to see any movie, anywhere, anytime. Did I have a beard then, too? 1987 was a year of crushes for me, whatever their names were, but it was more of a year of movie shows. I saw just about everything I could. That summer I would take in 3 or 4 movies a day alone all summer. Everything from Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, to The Untouchables, The Believers, Wish You Were Here, The Gate, Roxane, Revenge of the Nerds, Nerds 2 in Paradise, Madawan, Who's That Girl, The Witches of Eastwick, RoboCop, Benji the Hunted, Jaws 4, The Revenge, Summer School Made to Order, The Lost Boys, with real-life actual vampires in attendance. More about that another time. And even arty, smarty Jean de Florette. I just had to see them all, and sometimes repeatedly. I would often flash my student ID and hop on the subway back into my old stomping grounds of Hell's Kitchen in Times Square, where I originally grew up, just to watch movies. In theaters filled with rats, bums, hoes, hypodermics, and permanently glucose floors, no less. Since I was exposed to these wonderful natural elements of 1980s New York City, living there at such a young age, none of it frightened me or deterred me from this growing passion. Horror movie shows, while scaring the crap out of me, became a constant until I launched myself away from them in a bit of a retreat to screwball comedy, fantasy, or foreign films. This came about because my grandmother, who had raised me from age 5 onward, would soon become obsessed with them herself, and they were becoming all too encompassing for my already screwed-with head. Eventually, I had returned to scary movie shows, restoring balance in my movie universe, and I haven't looked back since. And sometimes I even go into the basement, even though the movie trailer clearly said, don't. After the summer of 87, life for me was just a bit different. I entered a permanent state of euphoria, where the only things that made me seem like I was home was my darkened seat 4 rows back in the center, and the theater's policy up on the screen. No, thank you for being there for me. To come to Lowe's. That brought me through the very end, where I learned that in Hollywood I should totally visit Universal Studios. This obsession coincided with a movie collecting passion, which began that year as films were becoming more affordable to own on the VHS format. There were stores popping up everywhere offering used videos for some bucks, and I quickly started playing scavenger and invaded them on weekdays, after school, and weekends. My collection kept growing through the late 80s onward to this day, but I never gave up going to the picture shows. Nothing ever matched that experience, but still my own personal copy of a favorite teen slob or sex comedy of the 80s on VHS and later DVD is a terrible thing to waste. And secret admirer, I'm totally talking to you. Susan, it turned out, was a monster New Kids on the Block fan. I'm talking bedroom plastered everywhere with posters and Teen Beat photos galore fan. It was rumored she had dyed her curls to a color that suited Joey or Donnie or whoever best. And no, I didn't go back to her house and further engage in every breath you take stalking to authenticate any of this. She admitted it freely after being probed by someone at school, and I merely just eavesdropped. A more minor invasion of privacy, don't you think? So as it happens, Susan didn't have the right stuff, after all. But I did, on VHS even. And that was 1987 for me. How do you feel about 1987? Let me know. Let us know on the Retro Movie Love Podcast Facebook page, on Cinema de Meep Facebook page. But just go on Facebook and do Retro Movie Love Podcast. Do a search for that. And like our page. And maybe comment on some of the posts, and let us know if you like, if you agree with these movies, and let me know what 1987. I'll put a poll on there and see what 1987 films are your favorites. But like I said, this podcast was 1987 by my 12-year-old self, and if you can keep that in mind, that'd be great. What movies did you love in 1987? I really want to hear them. And if you weren't around in 1987, that's totally cool. Let me know anyway what your favorite movies are from that year. All about that. So look for us on Facebook and Cinema de Meep on Facebook as well. Retro Movie Love Podcast has a website, so retromovielove.com. That's where you can find these podcasts and download them, as well as iTunes and Stitcher. Just do a search for us online. But yeah, join us and have some fun on social media. And I really want to thank you for joining me on this discussion for good old 87. Means a lot to me, and I hope it means something to you. And hope you had some fun. Let's go out with a song that was pretty popular in 1987. It was actually from a film soundtrack. It's from the Who's That Girl soundtrack. So yes, I'm going out with some Madonna. And it's a song I liked a lot, and I liked Who's That Girl. So it didn't make my top 10, but it was a remake of a movie I absolutely love from the 30s called Bringing Up Baby, or a reworking of. It's not a complete remake. And it's a soundtrack that I really liked in 1987, and so I had to include a track from it here because I was a big fan of the soundtrack. And here it is. Here is the song from Who's That Girl that I really liked. You'll know what it is. I'm sure you have a sneaking suspicion. It's not the title track. Here it goes.
Together
$908?
I can explain it.
All right, go ahead.
Daddy, there were 10 poor people. I met them in the street. I took them dancing.
Boy, I thought if I gave you everything you wanted, it might make up for your mother's death, but I succeeded in spoiling you.
Daddy, is it true Aunt Mildred's a lesbian?
You are completely lacking in character.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry.
What is Starlight Foundation anyway?
It's a charity. They grant children's wishes.
Maybe I could apply.
What do you want?
Oh, nothing. I make enough here to send money to my family in El Salvador. I'm okay.
Yeah, but if you could have one wish, what would you wish for?
Somebody to clean the kitchen after the party.
No, I'm serious.
So am I.
What about you, Audrey?
Janine's tuition.
What about you? What would you wish for?
Well, right now, I guess I wish I could get all these people to listen to my music. What about you?
I'd wish... I wish that all your wishes come true.
Does he love me? I wanna know. How can I tell if he loves me so? Is it in his eyes? Oh no, you'll be deceived. Is it in his eyes? Oh no, he'll make believe if you wanna know. If he loves you so, it's in his kiss.
That's where it is.
Why don't you kiss him? Squeeze him tight. Find out what you wanna know. If it's love, like it sure enough is there in his kiss? About the way he acts. Oh no, that's not the way. And you're not listening to a word I say. If you wanna know if he loves you so, it's in his kiss.
That's where it is.
Oh yes, it's in his kiss.
That's where it is.
Why don't you kiss him? Ooh, squeeze him tight. Find out what you wanna know. What you wanna know. If it's love, like it really is. Is there in his kiss about the way he acts? Oh no, that's not the way. And you're not listening to a word I say. If you wanna know if he loves you so, it's in his kiss.